Hi, my name is Tyler Whitman. Thank you all again for coming out tonight. We're going to talk some more about sustainable farming and industrial farming today. Today's industrial methods of food production and consumption is not only damaging our health, but it's destroying our natural environment. Today I'd like to talk to you about the downsides of modern agriculture and present some alternatives to it. As far as all you guys know me pretty well and know that my passion for food has been developing over the past half decade to a decade or so. So I've evolved more and more into the types of food I'm interested in. I'm an omnivore, as we've all biologically evolved to be, and I always intend to be. But as I look deeper into what we eat, I had to start thinking of not only where our food comes from, but why it's produced that way and what impact that has not only on us as people, but on our natural environment. Our methods of growing and producing vegetables and meats has changed more in the last 60 years than it did in the previous 10,000 years. Today you can go into any grocery store in the US and you can find a tomato, no matter what time of year it is. Michael Pollan, author of The Omnivore's Dilemma and a consultant for the documentary Food, Inc., states that there are no seasons anymore in the American supermarket. Now there are tomatoes all year round, grown halfway around the world. They're picked when they're green, and then they're ripened with ethylene gas to make it look like a tomato. So it's less of what would be a natural tomato and more of just the notion of a tomato. It's like the idea of a tomato, but not really what a tomato should be, like you could typically find grown in your own backyard. Also, you need to think about what is being ingested when you eat these vegetables and products like this. They're grown unnaturally with fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides. And not only do these get on the outside, but they grow into the inside of your food, which is in turn ingested by people. A quote from Christian Schaefer of PANA, which is the Pesticide Action Network of North America, states that the CDC has found pesticides in 100% of people who have had both their blood and urine tested. And the average person that was tested for pesticides has a toxic cocktail of 13 of the 23 pesticides that were tested. And that's a result of our modern diet that we eat today from our local supermarkets. Now, it's not just fruits and vegetables, obviously. We also need to look at how our industrial meats are manufactured, processed, and given to us. Industrialized chicken farming today strips chicken of their natural behaviors. They don't have the natural ability to nest, roost, and share open space. Believe it or not, humans did not invent chickens. They were here long before us. But we did invent the methods of growing chickens and manipulating them to sell more, to have a greater product and greater meat on their bodies. So they've been genetically grown to have heavier bodies. Now, the product value in chicken is in their breast meat and their wings. But their legs, there's no purpose to sell their legs, to grow their legs to keep up with their bodies. So as the chickens get older in age, before they're dispatched, their legs are unable to sustain the weight of their massive bodies, and this leads to chickens in coops with broken legs, damaged legs. They can hardly move around in their own pens, and they can hardly get to water that's given to them. But according to the industry, that seems okay for them. The crowding in chicken pens today, each of these massive chickens are given about 1/2 of a square foot to move around in. So these chicken coops are packed wall to wall. This causes stress in the chickens and they end up fighting each other. Now, to prevent the fighting, chicken manufacturers have taken chickens at young ages, taken a hot blade, and industrially cut the beaks off so they can't peck at each other. It's very unsanitary conditions as the chicken excrement gets all over their pens, and the ammonia residue lifts up and spreads all throughout there, creating unsanitary conditions for workers, and especially unsanitary for the chickens who live in this environment and not only ingest the ammonia, but it burns their eyes and often causes blindness. Then it's factory killing process from there on out, but by the time they can barely walk, there's not much use to them besides to package them up and sell them. This also covers industrial beef farming. Now, cattle have always grazed on grasses, And still today, most cattle will spend their first 7 to 9 months grazing on grasses like they have for centuries. Then they're shipped thousands of miles across the country to feedlots. And it's when they get to the feedlots that they're introduced to synthetic hormones and growth enhancers. The Ohio State University actually did a study with Zeranol, which is a popular hormone for cattle approved by the FDA, where they mixed breast cancer cells with Zeranol and noticed an acceleration of the breast cancer cells when they were introduced to this hormone. The sanitary conditions are not much better on cattle feedlots, as cattle manure just stacks and stacks up, and there's no way for the earth to be able to absorb it all. So the cattle spend the last of their lives in this, and then lots of the manure then is run off and gets into streams and other food production facilities. They're primarily fed corn-fed diets, which corn for cattle is unnatural for them. It's not something that they've evolved to be able to eat. It can make a nice cut of meat. It can give you some nice marbling, but having had grass-fed beef myself, there really isn't that big of a difference. And with the unnatural corn in their diet, it creates an unnatural acid production in their stomachs. And these toxins can also transfer into the meat that we eat today. And basically their diets that are forced them in a feedlot is a slow death for them, but conveniently they're killed before they die of forced feeding. A quote from Joel Salatin, who was a natural organic farmer from the movie Food Inc., says, "Nobody sits back and asks, but should we be feeding cows corn? We've become a culture of technicians. We're all into the how of it, and nobody's sitting back and actually asking, why do we do this?" Joel Salatin is currently a leader in environmental responsible, ecologically beneficial, and sustainable agriculture. He raises cattle that are not only grass-fed, but grass-finished. His cattle are free to roam their entire lives, moving from one pasture to another pasture, which is completely sustainable. They only eat the natural grasses, which the grasses before they feed on them have been completely undisturbed for 100 days before they get to them. And another belief that he has is he doesn't ship his cattle any lower than a 4-hour drive from his farm. When the cattle move pastures, when they've trampled and eaten all the grass, that's when his chicken coops move in there. And the chicken will stomp around on the land that the cattle have gotten. They will go scavenge for bugs and fly larvae that are left over from the cattle manure. And chickens actually get 15% of their food from the flies that are pupating on the cattle feces. But as they scratch for these pupae, they also spread the manure around into the field, where it can regenerate into the soil and grow fresh, new, very nutritious grass for the cattle to eat on. So this kind of covers a little bit of industrial agriculture. It shows some of the downsides of an industry that is overwhelmingly taking over our supermarkets, and there's some attention given to it, but perhaps not enough, and perhaps we should all look into a little bit more where our food comes from and how it's affecting our environment and our families. Thank you.